The text message arrived just as I was boarding my flight to my dad's funeral. Don't bother coming. You're not welcome here. The words from my brother, Jacob, hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt myself stumble as I found my seat on the plane. Are you okay, dear? An elderly woman next to me asked with concern. I shook my head slightly. Not really. I'm Emily, and this wasn't the first time my family had pushed me away. But being outright banned from my own father's funeral? Even for them, this was a new low. Miss, you'll need to turn off your phone now, a flight attendant said, standing by my row. I nodded, barely registering her words, but not before another message appeared on my screen. It was from my sister, Lena. I'm so sorry, Emily. Jacob and Ethan made the decision. I tried to stop them. The memory of a similar event 3 years earlier rushed back. Mom's funeral. Back then, they'd tried to keep me away too. I had ignored them and shown up anyway. That day still stung. I could clearly recall Jacob grabbing my arm in the church parking lot, his fingers digging into my skin. How dare you show your face here, he had snarled. You abandoned the family when Mom needed you most. I had yanked my arm free and snapped back. I didn't abandon anyone. I just chose a different path. Mom supported my decision. Ethan, ever the peacemaker, had stepped between us. This isn't the time or place for this. Mom wouldn't want us fighting. But Jacob had sneered. Mom wouldn't want a lot of things, like her only daughter choosing her precious career over family. The plane took off, jolting me back to the present. I closed my eyes, fighting the tears that were threatening to fall. My phone, now silenced, felt heavy in my pocket. I knew it was full of unread messages from Brian, my business partner. He had offered to come with me, but I had told him no. This was something I thought I'd have to face alone. Now, I wasn't facing anything at all. The woman next to me offered a tissue. Family troubles, dear? I let out a bitter laugh. You could say that. My brothers just banned me from our father's funeral. Her eyes widened. Good Lord. For what reason? I wiped my eyes and sighed. Because I dared to dream bigger than the family business. I wanted to build something of my own instead of living in my dad's shadow forever. I paused. And they blame me for Mom's death. She looked shocked. Oh my, how could they? Mom had cancer, I said quietly. They think that if I had stayed home instead of moving to New York to start my company, she might have lived longer. As if my being there could have stopped stage for pancreatic cancer. The plane reached cruising altitude, and the drink cart rolled down the aisle. I ordered a whiskey, something I rarely did, but today felt like it called for one. As soon as we landed, I turned my phone back on, and it buzzed immediately. This time it was Ethan. Emily, please understand. Dad's last weeks were hard. He kept asking why you weren't there. My hands trembled as I typed back. Maybe because none of you told me he was sick. 3 dots appeared on the screen, vanished, then reappeared. Finally, his reply came. We tried calling your office. I felt anger bubbling up. You have my cell number. You have my email. You know where I live. Don't pretend this wasn't deliberate. Another message popped up, this time from Lena. They're starting the service in an hour. I can live stream it to you if you want. I stared at her message, feeling torn. Finally, I typed back, no. They wanted me out, so I'm out. But tell Jacob something for me. What do you want me to tell him? Tell him Dad's company won't be the only Howard legacy anymore. I'm going to build something so big, so successful, that our family name will be known for my achievements, not just Dad's. Emily, don't do anything rash, she replied. I turned off my phone and headed to the rental car counter. If my family didn't want me at the funeral, fine. I had somewhere else to be. My company was about to close the biggest deal of its history, and I wasn't about to let their rejection derail that. As I drove away from the airport, my mother's words echoed in my mind. Don't let them clip your wings, sweetheart. Fly as high as you can. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Don't worry, Mom, I whispered. I'm going to soar so high they'll never be able to reach me. And when their company inevitably came crashing down, as it would, thanks to Jacob and Ethan's poor leadership, I would be watching from above. Let them exclude me. Let them blame me for things I couldn't control. I'd show them what real power looked like. And when the time came, They'd be the ones begging for my help. I hit the highway, leaving my father's funeral behind. Ahead of me was New York, my company, and my revenge. It would be calculated, cold, and entirely within the boundaries of business law. After all, I am my father's daughter. Brian, Willow. This is exactly what you've been waiting for, Willow said, grinning. The perfect revenge, served on a silver platter. Brian nodded, but his expression was serious. Be careful. Family businesses are messy. I unmuted the phone call. I'll think about it, I said to Lena, but I have conditions. Anything, she replied quickly. I want a meeting with everyone. That includes Jacob. There was a pause on the other end. He won't like that, Lena said hesitantly. Then I guess you'll need to convince him, I said firmly. Because unless he's there, acknowledging that he needs my help, I'm not lifting a finger. I'll make it happen, she promised. Thank you, Emily. After hanging up, I walked to the window, staring out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. 5 years ago, they hadn't even let me say goodbye to Dad. And now, here they were, practically begging for my help. Are you really going to help them? Willow asked, watching me closely. I turned back to her and Brian. Oh, I'm going to do more than help them, I said, a smirk tugging at my lips. I'm going to take over. Brian let out a low whistle. Jacob will never agree to that. He won't have a choice, I replied confidently. They're drowning, and I'm the only lifeline they have. I picked up the acquisition papers we had just signed. Besides, I didn't build all of this to play nice. My phone buzzed again with a text from Lena, meeting set for Friday. Jacob agreed. Please don't make us regret this. I showed the message to Brian and Willow. Ready to face your demons? Willow asked. More than ready, I replied, sitting back at my desk. I pulled up Howard and Son's financial records. Dad had always told me, business isn't personal, but he was wrong. Sometimes it's very personal. Brian began packing up his things. Want me there on Friday? No, I said, shaking my head. This is family business for now. After they left, I stayed late, poring over every detail of my family's company's collapse. Each poor decision, every missed opportunity, and all the outdated policies Jacob had clung to told a clear story, a toxic mix of pride and incompetence. I couldn't wait for Friday. For 5 years, I had been building my empire, preparing for the day they would have no choice but to recognize what I'd accomplished. Dad's voice echoed in my mind. Don't let them clip your wings. Well, I hadn't just kept my wings, I had learned to soar. And now it was time to come home and roost. Walking into Howard and Sons felt like stepping back in time. Everything looked the same. The faded carpets, the dusty photos of Dad with his clients, and even the ancient coffee machine sputtering in the corner. But now, the whole place carried an air of decay. Michelle, Dad's old secretary, gasped when she saw me. Emily? Is that really you? Hi, Michelle, I said, smiling. I couldn't help but notice the new lines on her face. Still keeping this place running? Trying to, she said softly, glancing around before lowering her voice. Your brothers are in the conference room. All of them. I straightened my blazer. How bad is it really? Bad enough that Jacob's here on a Friday instead of the golf course, she replied. That said it all. The conference room went silent as I walked in. Jacob sat in Dad's old chair, of course. Ethan slouched beside him, and Lena stood by the window, wringing her hands. Well, Jacob said, not bothering to stand. Look who finally graces us with her presence. Nice to see you too, Jacob, I replied dryly. Love what you've done with the place. Very vintage. Ethan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Can we skip the hostilities? We're here to talk business, are we? I said, setting my briefcase on the table. Because the last time I tried to talk business with this family, I was told to stay in my lane and never come back. That was different, Jacob snapped. Yes, I said sharply. Dad was dead, and I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. Funny how you want my help now. Elle, please, Lena said, stepping forward. We're trying. I sighed and pulled out my laptop. Show me the books. Ethan slid a folder across the table. I flipped through it. each page filled with red ink and declining numbers. It was worse than I expected. Every line screamed mismanagement and a refusal to adapt. "When was the last time you updated your production line?" I asked, shaking my head. "Dad's methods worked fine," Jacob said defensively. "Dad's methods worked 20 years ago," I shot back. "The world has changed." I walked over to the wall of photos and stopped at one of Dad standing proudly in front of the factory. "You know what he once told me? The biggest mistake a businessman can make is thinking tomorrow will look like yesterday." "Don't you dare quote Dad to me," Jacob said, standing up. "Why not?" I said, spinning around to face him. "You pushed me out." "I wanted to preserve the company," he retorted. "You wanted to play CEO and drag us into your crazy ideas." "No," I said firmly. "I wanted to modernize and expand. You wanted to sit in Dad's chair and play king of the castle." "Stop it," Lena shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "This isn't helping." She was right. I took a deep breath. "Okay, let's talk solutions. I can help, but I have conditions," Jacob groaned. "Here we go. First, I want full control. No interfering parents. No committees. No, but Dad would have arguments." "For how long?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "Until the company is profitable again," I said. "Could be 6 months. Could be 2 years. "Absolutely not," Jacob shouted, standing again. "I won't hand over Dad's legacy to—" "What, Jacob's?" I said, cutting him off. "Your more successful sister? The one who built a company worth 10 times this one in 5 years. Lena placed a hand on Jacob's arm. "We don't have a choice," she said quietly. "The bank's meeting is next week." I continued. "Second condition. I merge this company with mine." The room erupted. "You can't," Jacob shouted. "That's ridiculous." "Listen," I said, raising my voice. "You need my resources, my connections, my modern infrastructure. A merger is the fastest way to save this company." Jacob's face turned red. "This isn't help. It's a takeover." "Call it whatever you want," I replied. "But without me, this company dies. Dad's legacy dies. Your choice." Ethan rubbed his face. "Can we have time to discuss this?" "You have until Monday," I said, packing up my laptop. "After that, I'll be busy with my own acquisitions." As I walked out, I stopped at the door and looked back. "Oh, and Jacob? That private meeting you're planning with United Manufacturing? Cancel it. They'll be filing for bankruptcy next week." His jaw dropped. "How did you—" "I know everything happening in this industry," I said with a smirk. "That's why you need me." I left the room and stopped by Dad's old office. Through the glass, I could see that Jacob had kept it exactly the same. The same desk, the same chair, everything. But Dad's true legacy, his spirit of innovation, was long gone. Michelle appeared beside me. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. "Your father always said you were the one most like him." Jacob got his stubbornness, Ethan his charm, but you got his vision. I touched the glass, then turned away. Behind me, I could hear my siblings arguing in the conference room. They had until Monday to swallow their pride, but I already knew what they'd choose. Pride doesn't pay the bills. And banks don't care about family legacies. By Sunday night, they called. "Not Monday, Sunday." Jacob's voice was strained. "We accept your terms." "What's going on?" Ethan asked, stepping into my office. "Close the door," I ordered. "And call Jacob. We're having a family meeting." "He's at the club," Ethan said hesitantly. "Then get him here," I replied firmly. An hour later, we were all seated around the conference table. The damning documents were spread out in front of us. Jacob's face turned an unsettling shade of purple as Brian, my legal counsel, laid everything out for everyone to see. "These transactions," Brian said, pointing to a spreadsheet, "show systematic theft over the past 3 years. Nearly $2 million funneled through shell companies." "That's impossible," Jacob sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "I review all major transactions." "Exactly," I said, locking eyes with him. "You review them. So either you're incompetent or you're involved." Ethan shot out of his chair. Are you seriously accusing our brother of stealing? I'm just stating the facts, I said calmly. Money has disappeared, and Jacob had oversight. Do the math. Lena, sitting across the table, placed a hand on Jacob's arm. Tell them it's not true, she pleaded, her voice shaking. Jacob's silence was deafening. It filled the room like a thick, choking fog. Finally, Ethan whispered, Rich, tell me it's not true. It wasn't stealing, Jacob muttered at last, his voice barely audible. I was investing in new opportunities. In your personal account? I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. That's called embezzlement, dear brother. You don't understand. Jacob shot back. After Dad died, we were struggling. I needed capital for side ventures to keep us afloat. To keep your golf membership afloat, you mean? I said, pulling up his personal bank records. Country club dues, vacation homes, private school for your kids, all while the company was bleeding money. Brian cleared his throat. As your legal counsel, I feel obligated to point out that this constitutes criminal behavior. Jacob leaned forward, his face desperate. You wouldn't. I'm your brother. Watch me, I said, standing up. You have two choices. Either you resign immediately, surrender all company shares, and repay every penny, or I call the police. You can't do this, Jacob hissed, his face twisting in anger. This is my company. Not anymore, I said coldly. I nodded to Brian, who slid a document across the table. Resignation papers, he said. Sign them. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Dad would be ashamed. Dad's dead, Jacob snapped. And she's destroying everything he built. No, Lena said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. You did that yourself. Jacob looked around the table, searching for even a shred of support. Finding none, his shoulders slumped. With shaking hands, he picked up the pen and signed the papers. I want your resignation letter on my desk tomorrow, I said, taking the papers. Cite personal reasons. Keep it clean, and we'll keep this quiet, for Dad's sake. Jacob stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. What now? Ethan asked, turning to me. Now, I said, pulling out my laptop. We rebuild, starting with a full audit and restructuring. As I began reviewing the plans, Lena spoke up. I found something else, she said, her voice soft. She handed me a yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter, dated just before Dad's death. My breath caught as I read the familiar handwriting. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, I failed to fix things between you and your siblings. I was wrong to let them push you away. Your vision for the company was right. I see that now. I hope someday you'll come back and show them a better way. Love, Dad. My hands trembled as I held the letter. When did you find this? I asked quietly. This morning, Lena replied. Jacob never sent it. Brian placed a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Call the executive team, I said. I want everyone here in an hour. It's time to announce some changes. As they filed out, I walked to the window, looking down at the factory floor. Workers moved between the machines just as they had in Dad's day, but soon everything would change. My phone buzzed with a text from Willow. Heard about Jacob. You okay? I typed back. Better than okay. Finally, I had what I wanted. Revenge. I paused, thinking about Dad's letter, Jacob's downfall, and the future of the company. No, I corrected myself, typing again. Justice, and a chance to make things right. The factory whistle blew, signaling the shift change. It was time to face the staff and begin a new era for Howard Enterprises. Dad's legacy wasn't over. It was just getting started. 3 months had passed since Jacob's resignation, and the company was undergoing massive changes. Not everyone was happy about it. You're firing half the management team? Ethan asked, pacing my office and running his hands through his hair. I'm not firing them, I corrected, flipping through the reorganization plans. I'm offering them new positions or early retirement packages. The old hierarchy doesn't work anymore. My phone buzzed with another angry email from one of the old guard. These dinosaurs are fighting me at every turn, I muttered. They're scared, Lena said from her desk. I had promoted her to Chief Operations Officer, a move that had surprised everyone. But she had a natural talent for logistics, and I trusted her completely. They should be, I replied, pressing the intercom button. Michelle, is everyone here for the meeting? Yes, Michelle replied. And Jacob's here too. I sat up straight. What? He's demanding to speak to the board, Michelle said. Ethan and Lena exchanged uneasy looks. Let him try, I said, grabbing my presentation materials. The board is about to vote on my modernization plan anyway. Perfect timing. The conference room fell silent as I walked in. Jacob stood at the far end, wearing a rumpled suit that had clearly seen better days. The board members looked uncomfortable, as though they were caught between two feuding parents. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, but Jacob cut me off. Before my sister continues dismantling our father's legacy, he announced, I have evidence of her corporate espionage. The room gasped. I kept my face calm. Really, Jacob? That's your moves. He slapped a folder onto the table. She's been stealing our clients, undermining our contracts, all while pretending to help. Ethan picked up the folder, flipping through the papers. These are internal documents, he said. How did you get these? I have friends in accounting, Jacob smirked. Not everyone supports this hostile takeover. I walked calmly to the screen and pulled up a spreadsheet. You mean these contracts? I said, highlighting rows on the screen. The ones that were already failing under your leadership? The ones where you overcharged clients by 40% to cover your personal expenses. Jacob's smirk disappeared. Or, I continued, would you like to explain to the board why our biggest client switched to my company 6 months ago? Here's their complaint file. Dozens of quality control issues, delayed shipments, and inflated invoices. You're destroying everything Dad built. Jacob shouted. No, I said, slamming my hands on the table. I'm saving it. I didn't see it before, Ethan said, his voice thoughtful, but you really are Dad's daughter. He would have been proud of today. I ran my fingers over Dad's old blueprint, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and determination. We're not done yet. Tomorrow we start phase 2, retooling the production line. Lena chuckled. The old guard's going to hate that. Good thing I'm not here to be liked, I replied, rolling up the blueprint. I'm here to build something that lasts. Outside the factory, lights lit up the darkening sky, casting a glow on the new Howard Enterprises logo. Change was happening whether they liked it or not. Someone's sabotaging the new equipment, Brian said, dropping a security report on my desk. I stared at the photos of damaged machinery, rubbing my temples. Third incident this month, I muttered. 6 months into the modernization, we'd hit resistance harder than I expected. Production's down 30%, Lena added, pulling up the latest numbers. The workers are scared. Someone's spreading rumors that the automation will replace them all. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Ethan was calling from the factory floor. You need to get down here. Now. When I arrived, chaos greeted me. Workers huddled in nervous groups while the machinery sat idle. At the center of it all stood Matthew, our longest-serving foreman, holding up a stack of papers. These documents prove it, he shouted as I approached. She's planning to fire everyone over 50 and replace us with machines and college kids. I stopped in my tracks. Those documents are fake, I said loudly, making heads turn. Where did you get them? Matthew's face flushed red. I found them in the break room. Really? I stepped closer, holding up the papers. Because these have Jacob's old letterhead. When did my brother contact you, Matthew? The crowd murmured, and Matthew shifted uncomfortably. Everyone to the conference room, I announced, my voice firm. 10 minutes later, I stood before the gathered workers. Decades of experience filled the room, generations of families who had built their lives around this company. Their fear was real, even if the documents weren't. Let me be clear, I began. No one is getting fired. The automation isn't replacing you. It's supporting you. That's not what we heard, someone called out. I know there are rumors, I said, projecting images onto the screen. And I know change is scary. But take a look at this. Our competitors' factories. This is what we're up against. The photos showed sleek, modern facilities. Last quarter, they tripled their output. But here's what they don't have. I switched to another slide, showing our employee records. 250 years of combined experience in this room. Knowledge no machine can replace. Ethan stepped forward. The automation handles dangerous, repetitive tasks. You'll be trained for specialized roles, higher pay, better conditions. Prove it, Matthew challenged. I pulled up the new salary structure. Average wage increases of 40% after training. Full benefits. College tuition support for your kids. A profit-sharing program. The room fell silent. But first, I continued, I need to know who's been sabotaging our equipment. Every broken machine costs jobs. Every delayed order pushes us closer to bankruptcy, the very thing Jacob nearly achieved. Lena handed out contracts. These guarantee your positions through the transition and beyond. But we need your help identifying the saboteur. A young worker stood up. It's Matthew, he said nervously. He's been meeting with Mr. Jacob at Joey's bar every week. I saw them. The room erupted in whispers. Matthew lunged toward the worker, but security intercepted him. Is this true? I asked, my voice sharp. Matthew glared at me. Jacob said you'd destroy everything, he spat. He said we needed to stop you before. Before what? I interrupted. Before I could save the company. I stepped closer. You've worked here for 30 years, Matthew. Have I ever lied to you? He looked away, saying nothing. Check his locker, someone called out. Security found tools matching the damage patterns, along with more fake documents. I'm not pressing charges, I said as security led Matthew out. But you're done here. And tell my brother that if he interferes again, our agreement about keeping his embezzlement quiet is void. Turning back to the workers, I addressed the room. Anyone else want to leave? The door's open. But if you stay, I need your full commitment. We do this together, or not at all. No one moved. Good, I said. Training starts tomorrow. Show me what you can do with the right tools. Back in my office, Brian reviewed the incident reports. Think Jacob will back off now. He has to, I said, signing Matthew's termination papers. He's broke in rehab and one phone call away from criminal charges. I'm more worried about the old guard's loyalty, I admitted. Today might have fixed that, though. Nothing builds trust like showing your cards, Ethan said. Lena entered, holding a report. The teams are already back at work, she said, smiling. And look, efficiency's up 15% since this morning. Sometimes you need a crisis to clear the air, Brian said. My phone buzzed with a text from Jacob's wife. He's doing better. Asked about the company today. Said maybe you were right about the changes. I glanced out the window. The factory floor, which had been filled with tension and fear that morning, now buzzed with activity. Workers gathered around the new machines, learning and asking questions. Fear was giving way to curiosity. Dad used to say, Lena began with a smile, that the hardest part of leadership is bringing people along with you. I watched as the workers embraced the future Dad had once dreamed of. We're not just bringing them along, I said. We're bringing them up. The factory hummed with new energy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still missing something. I only hoped we'd find it before the next crisis. The annual shareholders meeting was in full swing when Jacob walked in. 8 months sober, he looked good, clear eyes, pressed suit, steady hands. The room went silent as he made his way to the back. Please continue, Emily, he said quietly, taking a seat. I gripped the podium, steadying myself. As I was saying, our third quarter results exceeded all projections. The modernization program is a lie, a voice shouted. I looked up to see Tony, our former head of accounting, standing. I have proof, he declared, waving papers. Here we go again, I muttered. Tony, I said firmly, we've been through this. The audit committee. The audit committee is in your pocket, he shouted. Just like her brother was cooking the books. She's inflating the success of her precious automation program. To my surprise, Jacob stood up. That's not true. Every eye in the room turned to him. The numbers are real, he said. I've seen the raw data, the factory output, the client contracts. He walked to the front. My sister isn't destroying our father's legacy, he continued. She's building on it. Tony sputtered. But you said, at the club, you told us to fight her changes. I was wrong, Jacob said, turning to the shareholders. I was bitter, drunk, and wrong. This company was dying under my leadership. Emily saved it. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Jacob, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted. He pulled out a folder. I came here today to return these, my remaining shares. They belong with someone who knows what to do with them. Tony wasn't done. This is a setup, he shouted, storming toward the podium. Security moved to intercept him, but Jacob blocked his path. Enough, Tony, he said firmly. It's over. Go home before you embarrass yourself further. As Tony was escorted out, I turned back to the shareholders. Any other questions about the numbers? The room was silent. Then let's vote on the expansion proposal, I said. The vote was unanimous. As the shareholders and press filtered out of the room, Jacob lingered behind. I turned to him. That couldn't have been easy, I said quietly. He gave me a small, sad smile. Sobriety has a way of clearing your vision, he replied. During rehab, I found Dad's old journals. He wrote about you, you know. Jacob paused, his voice thick with emotion. He said you reminded him of himself at your age, always pushing boundaries, seeing possibilities no one else could. I felt my throat tighten but stayed silent, letting him continue. I was wrong about everything, he admitted. About the company, Dad's legacy. Jacob handed me a folder containing his remaining shares. These belong to you now. Use them better than I did. Just then, Ethan and Lena joined us. For the first time in years, all four of us stood together without any tension hanging over us. I have a proposal, I said, breaking the moment of quiet. The expansion plans include a new research and development division. We need someone to run it, someone who understands the old systems but isn't afraid to experiment. Jacob's eyes widened. Are you offering me the chance to be part of the future instead of clinging to the past? Interested? I asked. He hesitated. You trust me? After everything. Trust is earned, Ethan said, smiling. Like forgiveness. Lena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Jacob. Welcome back, brother. Later that evening, we gathered in Dad's old office. It was now a sleek, modern conference room, but his photos still lined the walls, a reminder of where we came from. Remember when we were kids? Lena asked, glancing around the room. And Dad would let us play office in here? You always wanted to be the boss. Ethan laughed. Look how that turned out. Jacob chuckled too, but there was no bitterness this time. Yeah. Look at us now. I touched the photo of Dad on the wall. He'd be proud of us. All of us. Even me. Jacob asked quietly. Especially you, I said, turning to him. It takes courage to admit you're wrong and to change. My phone buzzed. It was Brian with the final shareholder tallies. The support for the expansion was even higher than expected. So, Ethan asked, what's next? I smiled. Now, we build something extraordinary. Together. The setting sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the factory buzzed with renewed life, old and new working in harmony. To Dad, Jacob said, raising his glass of water. And to the future, I added. Our glasses clinked together. For siblings united again, stronger for having been broken. The company wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. And so were we. Ready for this? Brian asked, straightening my blazer as the cameras were set up in the factory's main hall. Born ready, I said, checking my notes one last time. Today wasn't just another press interview. Today, we were unveiling the complete transformation of Howard Enterprises. For the first time, all four of us were presenting together. Jacob approached with his tablet. R&D numbers just came in, he said. The new sustainable manufacturing process is exceeding expectations. Of course it is, Ethan called from the prototype display. It's your design. Behind us, the factory floor was a hive of activity. Workers moved confidently between the state-of-the-art machines, many of them the same employees who had once resisted change. Now they were leading training sessions for the newest hires. The Wall Street Journal reporter smiled as the photographer adjusted the lighting. Miss Howard, she began, your family company has become the industry leader in sustainable manufacturing. What sparked this transformation? Actually, I said, gesturing to my siblings, this is more than a business story. It's a family story. Lena approached with coffee in hand. Tell her about Dad's blueprint, she urged. Our father had a vision, I explained. He dreamed of a factory that balanced tradition with innovation. We found his original designs in the archives, automated systems, sustainable practices, everything we've implemented now. He was decades ahead of his time. But you faced significant resistance, the reporter noted. Even from within your own family. Jacob stepped forward, his voice steady. I was the biggest obstacle. Fear of change nearly destroyed us. But sometimes the best way to honor a legacy is to build on it, not preserve it in amber. The real story, Ethan added, is how this company brought our family back together. Michelle appeared with an urgent message. The government contract team is here early. I'll handle it, Lena said, her calm efficiency shining through as she headed out. The reporter raised an eyebrow. Your executive team is unusually diverse. Talent doesn't follow traditional patterns, I said with a smile. Neither should leadership. A commotion near the factory entrance caught our attention. Workers were gathering, phones raised. What's happening? I asked. Jacob checked his tablet and broke into a grin. Stock just hit an all-time high. The sustainable manufacturing announcement leaked. The photographer captured the spontaneous celebration as it spread across the factory floor. Longtime employees hugged new hires, knowing the profit-sharing program meant they'd all benefit. Remember when they were ready to riot over the changes? Ethan murmured. Now look, Jacob said proudly. They're leading the industry in adaptation. Brian approached with more news. The Tokyo office just called. They want to license our sustainable manufacturing process. Tell them to wait for the official announcement, I said, then turned back to the reporter. Where were we? I was about to ask about your father, she said. Do you think he'd recognize the company today? I looked around. The factory had transformed, but it was still ours. Jacob was explaining new processes to veteran workers. Ethan was managing global logistics on his tablet. Lena was expertly handling government contracts. He'd recognize what matters, I said. Family, innovation, progress. The rest is just details. The reporter's final question caught me off guard. Any regrets about how it all played out? I thought about everything. The painful years of exile, Jacob's breakdown and recovery, the sabotage, the reconciliation. The path wasn't straight, I admitted. But every step led here. After the interview, my siblings and I gathered in the break room, away from the cameras. Dad's birthday is tomorrow, Lena said softly. Jacob pulled out an old photo of Dad standing in front of the original factory. First time in years we can visit him together, he said. He'd love what we've built, Ethan added. Not just the business, us. My phone buzzed again, Willow, congratulating us on the stock price. Another message followed. Tony had been hired by our main competitor. Problem? Brian asked, noticing my expression. Nothing we can't handle, I replied, showing my siblings the message. Jacob laughed. Let him try. We're not the same company he knew. We're not the same family, either, Lena added.